And now that I'm all zen and quiet in my heart and mind, I just want to kind of rev it up a little bit here. Our talk this week was entitled Clean Slate. And the more time I spent with the idea of a clean slate, the more I went, do we ever get a clean slate? And if we did, would we want one? For those of you who didn't grow up with actual blackboards, slate is what people used to write on in order to work out math problems. Sometimes they would get like a bill at a restaurant on a piece of slate. You would use chalk on it. And what I remember from my Catholic girl childhood was if you were super good, the nuns would let you take the erasers outside and clap them clean. Now, why that was a great big treat, I do not know, but it worked. I also remember thinking that you could erase the slate, but in order to get it really clean, you actually had to wash it. So there's more to creating a clean slate than just deciding that it should be erased or whatever was on it would be erased. And the thing is, I don't know that I would want everything that I might have tried to erase in the past to just go away. Last week at the end of service, I found out that there were some questions that had been asked in a place and typed out in a place I couldn't actually see them during the service. So one of them was from Olaf, who was watching from, I want to say it was Wisconsin. And he asked what my favorite name for God was. And because I do like to switch it up and try and keep at least an open mind, if not a completely clean slate every time I go speak to Spirit, I said that this week it would be Olaf. Now, I wasn't betting on how the brain works. I'm a very visual person. I need to know what I'm looking at. And so, unfortunately for me, I don't actually know Olaf in person. And so as I was in meditation and as I was in prayer, I was trying to speak to Olaf, and the only one I could think of was the character from Frozen. And so all I could hear was, heads up, here comes my butt. And I know for many people that would sound crazy. I know for many people, they would very much like me to get a clean slate and start over with a different idea of God. But the more I sat with that, the more I realized that all of those connections in the back of my brain, all of those things that I never quite erased, had given me a great way of thinking of the divine. Because here's the thing, I can think a new thought, but often in my life, my but shows up right afterwards. But I can't do it because I'm too old. But I can't do it because I'm too short. But I can't. But. So I bring my head up, I get a higher thought, and then here comes my butt. To me, while that might sound silly to some people, that's a deep thought. That's a very deep thought. And it's part of what keeps me from getting the clean slate I say I want. And so it brought me back to the idea of loving and accepting all that we are, including the times we were complete doofuses. Doofi? I don't know. I never took Latin. Including all the times we made what we would call mistakes. Now, Maya Angelou has a great way of thinking about this. What she said was, do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. So we take all of that stuff that we have been, that we have known, that we have experienced, and we allow it to help us do better. So I don't know that I would take a clean slate if you paid me, but I will take a new thought and add it to the collection of truth that makes up who I am and all of the things that I believe, consciously or otherwise, that are true about who I am and who you are and what God is. So it's ever expanding. It's not just one tiny little piece of notebook or notebook paper on which we can make all of our notes for the rest of our lives. We just have more and more space in which to add in more and more good. Right now, I am actually listening to a book called Caste. It is Oprah's book club. If anyone wants to talk about it, it is really ringing my bell. But the full name of the book is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. And it talks about issues of race. It talks about issues of history and how we got to be where we are. And one of the beautiful metaphors she uses is that of, imagine you've inherited the family home. Now, my home was only built in 1985, this house. But our family homes back east were built in the 60s, and then an older one was built, so it's about 100 years old. My brother's house is over 100 years old. And in each of those houses, any homeowner will tell you there's stuff to deal with. In my house, there is a flip on this, there's a switch on this side of the house that if I don't leave it on, will turn off the electricity on the other side of the house. I don't know why. I don't know who set it up that way. I don't know how to fix it myself. There are things about this house that just make no sense. I can jump up and down in the middle of one part of my floor, and actually it's like having a trampoline. At some point, I'm going to have to deal with that, or I will simply have a sunken living room. In an older house, and this house we call our country, it's more than 200 years old. And it's simply a truth that we imported the idea of racism or blackness. We imported the first slaves before the Mayflower got here. Now, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me for having a weird light switch in my house that turns on and off the electricity elsewhere. It doesn't mean that if you live in a 100-year-old house or older and some of the windows stick because wood shifts size, and some of the windows are a little hard to see through because glass that old actually does start to get thicker at the bottom than the top. It moves, believe it or not. It may be that your house is so old, or that your country is so old, or that your consciousness is so well developed and you're so in touch with the ancestors and your ancestral DNA that you still have, what was a water closet gets turned into the bathroom. Or in one of my family houses, what used to be a pantry is now a bathroom, because when it was built, there was no indoor plumbing. All of these things are simply part of our history. And I would suggest to you, if we can simply love ourselves with that as part of ourselves, rather than trying to make it go away, rather than trying to resist what has been, if we can see it for what it is and decide what we want to do with it, how we want to keep the good stuff and look at the stuff that simply doesn't work for us anymore, and forgive and release that. Let it evolve into something beautiful and good and new that serves us now. In this house, I would much rather have an actual bathroom than a pantry. That's just how I work. Maybe somebody would have a different opinion. So what we do is we don't refuse to see what has been. We simply open up to the possibilities that are in front of us. This week, at the beginning of the week, I found a poem called "This Is Our Dream." In America, thank God for old books, we have kind of forgotten that our imagination is one of our creative faculties. It is one of our ways of thinking things into being. And so when we dream weave, I like that word better, much better than brainstorm. Brainstorming sounds like something I need Tylenol for. But if I dream weave, and especially if I dream weave with other people, then what I find is there's all sorts of wonderful new imaginary things that I can feel into and decide if I want before I go to the trouble of actually doing it. And then I can call it in using the power of the one mind and the power of my word and our collective word. in order to create this. And so I'm going to read you a poem before we go into prayer today. And so if it seems like I'm looking down, it's because I'm reading something. This is a crowdsourced poem to inspire hope, and you can find it on npr.org. And I have actually shortened it up because there were parts that just didn't seem to apply. I dream of a world where the problems are the problem, not the people debating them. Where we lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms. Where we know each other's joys and sorrows, all these days and all the morrows. Where the news brings a smile. I dream a world straight and crooked paths are only for walking. A world drunk with self-esteem, fearless and ready. A world where you hold on to your dreams and I'll hold the door, pass on through, because the world is yours. I dream a world where that world is not a dream, but awake, vigilant. Community gardens on every corner, no more social media advertisements for body armor. People with mental health issues accepted as whole. Mosaic of humans not separated by colors, opinion, belief. Rested cages empty and unlocked, doors swung open, guards long since gone home. Where facts matter. A world as simple as a poem written in pencil, full of mistakes and erasures on the relentless path to its honest truth. Where, as soldiers of democracy nurturing us, teachers are publicly thanked for their service. I dream of a world transparent, walls and floors built of some durable crystalline material, where we know which student is really watching a TikTok video when we leave the room for a moment. That the paved gold that America promises prospers. Where the playing field is level, the same, for anyone willing and able. Where we anchor to hope and all it brings. Do you not see it is time to finish what has begun? A world that we want to live in, such a world I dream of. And so moving that into the attitude of prayer, it is time for me to speak my word, not to finish what was begun, but to take it to the next level. And so if you want to close your eyes with me, that's wonderful. If you want to simply relax in your chair and say yes to the parts that you agree with, absolutely, let's do that. And in these moments, I ask you to take these words for your own as you agree with them. Take the parts that work for you. And remember with me that God is truly all there is. This thing we call God, for want of a bigger word, a word that is big enough. A word that is music and poem and something beyond words. This thing we call life, this thing we call vitality or love or peace, this universal, perfect, beautiful, loving truth. This is what is, and everything else, anything that looks unlike that simply is not. I know and celebrate the golden moments of standing in this truth. Standing in this truth, in this lovely, beautiful starlight, moonlight, sunlight, all light. And looking at all of the other faces of God that populate this planet and any other dimension that might exist. I know and celebrate the absolute truth of our collective being as I speak my word for all of us, knowing that our truth is that we get to bring along all of what we are, no longer afraid to see color, but willing to see it in all its glory and all of the history that is so rich and beautiful and good, not just about the United States, but about the entire globe and our human history that goes way, way back to things crawling out of the mud and the individual cells that were the beginning of physical life expressed here on this planet, the first bodies of God. I know that the truth that has endured across all of that time is that God is love and God is within us, and we cannot be separated from it. We are not just indwelt, but surrounded by all of this good, and I acknowledge and accept and claim the all good for all of us. And resting in this, grateful for what is and has always been, knowing that Spirit's got this one. I release my word into the action of the law of cause and effect, knowing that it is as automatic as flipping the switch in my house. It has already said yes. Spirit has already said yes, and the law has swung into action, calling this into greater experience for all of us, making it our world that we live in consciously. Celebrating all of that, I call it good and oh so very good, and I let it be. And so it is.